Are you stuck in a financial rut? Well, there are dozens of debt repayment strategies out there, but how do you know what really works and what doesn't? Because everybody wants to sell you something, right? Well, luckily, we have access to the genius brain of Rick, the Professor Plum. You know him from his frequent appearances on Boomer's Brain Trust here on MoneyBiz Life Network. He is the Chief Financial Planning Officer at RJL Wealth Management. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. But I'm going to call you Professor Plum because it makes me feel like I'm playing a game, and I like that. And I just want to know where you did it and what you did it with. But we want to talk about ruts today because there are a lot of people in ruts, whether they're at the low end of the spectrum or the high end of the spectrum. It happens to all of us once in a while, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? Because you do learn and grow from that if you don't get...
You can learn and grow from it.
Okay, well then talk to us about the difference in response. When you have a rut, if you do X, you're likely to come out of it, and if you do Y, you're not. Tell us.
Well, when you're in a rut, first off, you have to identify that you are in a rut. I guess if you don't feel like you're in one, it doesn't mean you're not in one. And if you just,
Sure.
But at some point, especially in the financial area, where it usually means financial rut, is that you're developing a lot of debt, and you're living in a fantasy world, basically based on your income that you can't sustain. And at some point, it topples over, and you realize, I got to do something.
Okay, give us the math. Give me the calculation.
The math.
How do I know? How do I know if I am living in an unrealistic journey here?
If you are living on credit cards, if you are hitting your
Okay.
credit cards for living expenses every month.
Now, does that mean if you have any credit cards?
No, that doesn't, because
So
credit
if
cards
credit
can
cards
be,
are the living, if you're using them for living expenses.
if they're growing every month, if they're getting
Growing.
bigger, the balances are growing every month. If you're using those to pay for things, if you're running out of money and you're using those to basically buy some time until you get your next paycheck,
Okay.
that becomes a problem. Now, credit cards are, in many respects, a necessary evil. And just having a credit card isn't the issue. There's a lot of people that have credit card debt that came from an emergency issue or a tactical decision to use it, and they can pay it back down over a period of time. It's a very easy way to borrow money without going through a loan. And
And
going
you get
through
Sky Miles sometimes.
and so if you're utilizing them for the right reasons,
Yeah.
and carrying a debt, depending upon the interest rates, isn't the worst thing. But when you get to a point where you are maxed out on credit card A, so you open another one.
And you're
and you
stretching your paycheck that way.
And that's how you're stretching, and you're buying things that you may or may not really even need, but it's because you want, and you really can't afford them, and you really can't afford to pay it back. I mean, if all you can afford is the minimum payment, there's a problem here. And so when you max up this one, and then you go to another one, you max up, and you don't have a spending problem, you have a credit card problem. If you only had more credit cards, you don't have a spending problem. There is an issue.
Okay.
And so we have to then look at what's going on. A financial rut is one of two issues. Either your expenses are too high or your income is too low. So you have to change one of those things. Well, unfortunately, changing income isn't all that easy.
Right.
So we have to most likely focus on changing our spending habits and what we're doing.
Okay, now one of the first things a lot of people do, during the day, if you're ever home during the day, they run those credit counseling things all day, and you think, now, I always wonder, are those a scam? Do those people really help you? For people that are in that particular rut where they're living paycheck to paycheck and they're charging on credit cards and those credit card bills are getting bigger and bigger and they're taking out new credit cards, is that the place for a credit counseling person?
I don't know if it's the place to start. There's going to be some good ones out there, and there's going to be some that are just going to do something you can do on your own, but they're going to add to your problem by charging you money to do what you should be doing on your own. So if it's a for-profit company, you probably want to stay with it, but there are some nonprofits out there. But the first
So the accountability, though, can't that be a good thing sometimes?
Well, accountability is going to be good no matter what happens. But if they're not doing it to help you, really, they're just doing it as a sales process so they can do something and charge you for the service.
Yeah.
That doesn't help you.
No. No.
So part of the debt counseling services isn't just calling the credit cards and getting them to try to lower their interest rates and things. It's counseling you on your budgeting and getting you to change something other than the fact that you've maxed out your credit cards.
But it's amazing to me how many parents never taught their children anything about a budget.
Well, no,
my parents did great in a lot of areas, but that's one thing we just did never talk about. I talk about it with my kids. My husband is adamant about talking about it with my children. And part of that, I think, is because we've grown up in this kind of bizarre economy where you do have to save for a rainy day and those kinds of things. But it is critical, isn't it, that you give the children those basic foundational...
Everything. You have to start early.
Yeah.
And start teaching children early. And this is where it comes into, it's a problem. We want to basically be our friends' kids, and so we buy them things and we want them to be happy.
Yeah.
At some point, though, we have to teach them that money isn't just a matter of a plastic piece that goes into a machine and gives
Yes.
you back money. And well, you can't go get some. Just go to the ATM and get some money, Mom, Dad. Come on. And so we were talking about this on the Boomers Brain Trust today, how to teach kids about money, and a lot of it is purely personal responsibility. You've got to start teaching personal responsibility, and that's very difficult for a lot of people our age. Well, you're younger than me, but for people your age and older people like me to teach our kids, because we were never taught it, and we don't have the personal responsibility to pass it on. So we have to learn it ourselves to be able to pass it on. But one of the things we can do with our kids is, whether they have an allowance or whether we give them jobs that they can do to raise money, talk to them about what the money is for.
Yeah.
Now, it can be for a new PlayStation. It can be for a new this or that is purely a game or something fun, but that's out of their reach right now. And show them how they need to save to get to it. Monitor the savings, saying, hey, you know what? You said you wanted this, but you're not getting there.
Yeah.
What do you want to do about it? Do you really want it? Or, hey, you're doing a great job. Give them, show them what's happening with and saving, and help them get to it. And, going back to just kids and credit cards, I don't have a big problem with kids and credit cards as long as they're taught to use them. It helps build discipline. And if you use the cards that are either a prepaid card that doesn't have an annual fee, that has a very small limit, or that you can control, you have oversight of it as well.
Or a bank card that just is attached to their own bank account, right?
Debit cards are one thing, but credit cards will actually help them a little bit more, because they can carry a balance and they can learn to use debt wisely. I mean, there are things that we're going to buy.
That scares me to death, to be honest. I would not want my kids to have a card. I've seen them at Christmas.
Well,
yeah.
And letting them get into problems when they're 18, 19 with $1,000 of debt is a lot better than letting them get into and not understanding it, getting into problem when they're 28, 30 and getting $30,000 into debt. It's a lot harder to get out of that bigger number, even though they may be making money. So teach them a lesson early, but also have oversight on it. Don't let them get so far out of control that it's something they can't get out of.
Right.
But it's going back to personal responsibility. But we started talking about ruts, and people will get into ruts without noticing it, and so they do have to do something that they don't want to do. Most people want to continue doing exactly what they're doing, but that's what got them into the situation financially that's a rut. They have to change, whether it's a small change or a large change. Usually small changes that grow into bigger changes over time work better than just one wholesale, okay, I'm going to, cut everything out, and I'm getting rid of cable, I'm getting rid of my phones, I'm getting rid of everything. And
But don't, I see big personality differences on this front. I see, as a mother of 5 children, I see a couple of my children have a real tendency towards spending. I don't know where they got that. and a couple of my other children have a natural tendency towards saving. It's just what they seem to want to do. They aren't thinking all the time about the next thing they can go buy. And then when they do want to buy something that's high end, they pretty much can, because they've saved money almost without me even knowing it or being any part of it. And I think as adults, our brains are like that too. Some of us are just sort of preconditioned.
Well, it's a right brain, left brain type of mentality with finances.
Okay, and so the right brain,
more analytical, saver, planning, looking forward to it and saying, okay, they're not an instant gratification type of an individual. They want to be able to say, I want to save for it. They don't want to save for it, but they know they have to. And then the other side of is, hey, I want it now, and I'll deal with the consequences later.
But our head doesn't swell according to which side of our brain is much larger than the other, right?
Both sides can make your head swell.
I'm just teasing you. I want to shift to one other thing. We talked about the ruts, and we talked about on the sort of the low end of the totem pole, those who are really, really struggling, unfortunately, and should they seek out a credit counselor, or should they just apply discipline that you can get off the internet, for crying out loud, or certainly in books. But I want to ask you this question. I think this is something a lot of people are embarrassed to ask. Financial planners, I tend to think of that as kind of hoity-toity. Can anyone go to a financial planner? Do you have to have a lot of money to go to a financial planner? Or is it something that really you'll take somebody who is struggling with some of these debt issues, for example, but maybe has a decent salary, just can't seem to get it all in line?
Most financial planners are not going to want to talk to somebody who's purely in debt and looking for a way
So
out
it
of
is
debt.
a hoity-toity thing.
It's not hoity-toity. It's a business decision.
I understand,
A financial planner's time, they have to be able to make some money. So they're either going to charge you a fee for their time, which doesn't necessarily, I mean, it could help you depending upon the fee, or they're going to, many financial planners are paid by the investments that they oversee and manage. Well, if you don't have any money to invest, it's very difficult to get them interested in talking with you.
So what's a good salary benchmark?
salary benchmark.
Yeah.
I don't think the salary matters because I've
Okay.
seen people that make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year who have that discipline that
And
can
still
save.
have that excess and can
It's all about the discipline. I've also seen
see.
people that make $400,000 or $500,000 a year that don't have two nickels to scratch
And
together
they're
because they're
messing it
blowing
all up.
600,000 or 700,000.
Well,
so
there
it's
you
not
go.
an income level; it's
Yeah.
an attitude.
That's not an income level, it's an attitude. I love that. You gave us a little takeaway there. Thanks so much, Professor Plum, for being on the show. Remind us where we can find you.
Well, Boomer's Brain Trust on the Money Business Life
Yes.
Network or RGL Wealth Management, 800-644-1150.
All right. Your calls and letters coming up next. The number 888-650-8176, 888-650-8176. Get your call in right now, or you can go to the Smart Life page at moneybizlife.com. Click on the Ask Dr. Gina button, or you can send us an email. You can contact me also, Facebook and Twitter. We're so accessible. You just can't hardly believe it. Producer Jason coming up here in a moment to give us your calls and letters. More Smart Life coming right after this. You stay tuned.